Welcome to another episode of Change Starts With Us on Anchor Podcast, Spotify, and many others. Today, I would like to share my thoughts about the Mississippi uprising. If you remember the Lucasville one of '93, it's very deadly. I'm going to do mostly readings. I got this from the Washington Post. My memory is not the best like it used to be. It says five Mississippi inmates have been killed in a week, officials say. Now two are missing. Two inmates are missing from the notorious Mississippi State Penitentiary at Parchment. After five prisoners were killed and several others injured this week. Across the state's correction system, the state prisons are in lockdown as authorities try to identify what sparked the violence at these facilities. Let's discuss what sparked the violence. One is the treatment of inmates, and if you looked at the conditions of that prison, that's ridiculous and abusive and a disgrace that any human life would have to be in those type of environments. So I don't see what they have to really investigate. It's common ground and common sense. Okay, major disturbances that started December 29 were partly provoked by gangs, the Mississippi Department of Corrections MDOC said. The most recent inmate death happened early Friday when authorities said Donnell Howell, 36, injured his neck during a fight with his cellmate at Parchment. Things are kind of surreal at this point. Sunflower County Coroner Heather Burton told the Clarion Ledger in Jackson, Mississippi, every time the phone rings at this point, it's another one. This is really sad, very sad. Officials promised to prosecute aggressors to the full extent of the law. Let's talk about prosecuting. Why aren't they prosecuted for the abuse that is taking place in these prisons, for the conditions that they force these people to live in? They're the ones that should be prosecuted. Inmates are going to do whatever it takes to survive. They're in prison. They have no choice. The conditions are awful. The treatment is awful. The lack of programming is awful. Okay, so he's going to prosecute to the extent of the law, like we just said, and said movement of 3 state prisons, 3 privately managed prisons, and 15 regional prisons is limited to emergency. Parchment's inmates have been transferred to more secure housing units at the facility in an attempt to quell the outburst, authorities said. During an emergency count at about 1:45 a.m. Saturday, Parchment staff noticed that David May, 42, and Dylan Williams, 27, were missing, officials said. May is serving a life sentence for 2 aggravated assault convictions, and William is serving 40 years for residential burglary and aggravated assault. State and local police are helping correctional officers search for the men. The chaos comes the same week a federal jury ruled that previously bad conditions at East Mississippi Correctional Facility had been fixed and that the privately run facility and resolved any constitutional violations that may have existed. The American Civil Liberties Union and the Southern Poverty Law Center brought a lawsuit in 2013 alleging that prisoners lived in the barbaric conditions where illnesses were untreated, rats climbed over beds, and guards used excessive force, among other issues. That's nothing new, is it? We see some of the same stuff in Ohio. I think the cleanliness is much better in Ohio, but the treatment definitely is not. Mississippi has one of the highest incarceration rates in the country, and the prison system has struggled with a lack of funding, declining numbers of guards, and accusations of abuse. An investigation by ProPublica and the Mississippi Center for Investigative Reporting found that a 2014 prison reform law had failed to significantly improve the system. Unfortunately, this is another chapter in what is a history of mismanagement and neglect that have infected the Mississippi prison system for decades. Said Eric Balaban, I'm not good with names, folks, senior staff counselor at the ACLU's National Prison Project. Governor Phil Bryant, Republican, said that he was in contact with the correctional officials about the latest disturbance across the state and that gang violence would not be tolerated in the prisons. Governor-elect Tate Reeves wrote on Twitter, "There is much work to be done in our correctional system." Well, Ohio, let's take that as a suggestion before stuff like this happens nationwide. Excuse me. Going to Burton Walter Gates, 25, and Roosevelt Holman, 32, were fatally stabbed during gang-related riots at Parchment on Tuesday and Thursday, respectively, and Gregory Emery, 26, was killed Thursday at the Chickasaw County Regional Correctional Facility, according to Clarion Ledger. Authorities have not specified how Dobbins and Emery were killed. They declined to identify the gangs involved in the conflict, but the Associated Press reported that the ongoing conditions was between the vice lords and the black gangster disciplines. Those are two I don't know about, but I say this much. The gangs will always get involved on mistreatment, and the inmates were pulled together when it comes against staff and the DRC. Just remember that. Okay, there are trying times for the Mississippi Department of Corrections, MDOC. Commissioner Felicia Hall said in a statement, "It is never a good feeling for a commissioner to receive a call that a life has been lost, especially over senseless acts of violence." But I guarantee they go home and sleep pretty good. Dobbins' sister, Candace Dobbins, told the AP that her brother felt unsafe at South Mississippi Correctional Institution and that she had been trying to get him transferred. Dobbins was serving a life sentence for a murder in Adams County and 8 additional years for aggravated assault in Sunflower County. The Clarion Ledger reported, citing correctional officials. This is really a lot to take in, isn't it? Dobbins hoped to open a barbershop if he was ever released and told his young relatives to stay out of trouble so they would not get locked up. Candace Dobbins told the Clarion Ledger, the prisoners run the facility, she told the AP. I know guards have to talk with the inmates to keep control over the other inmates. Correction officials said Howell's death and minor fire at Parchment appeared to be unrelated to the main disturbance. Case Sullivan, an office administrator for the Burton, said in an email that a chaotic environment, poor lighting, and significant amount of spilled blood made investigating the death of Parchment extremely difficult. At a full capacity, Parchment housed 3,560 male inmates, including some on death row. Inmates make textiles and metals as part of the prison's work program. Several lawsuits have alleged that conditions at Parchment are inhumane. Prisoners told PBS NewsHour that the roofs leak, windows are broken, and inmates can easily access contraband, including drugs. Grace Fisher, communication director for the Mississippi Department of Corrections, disputed the characterization to PBS. Of course she would. On Tuesday, Hall announced that she will be leaving the Mississippi Department of Corrections in mid-January to accept a position in the private sector. She did not release details about her new job. 50 inmates died in Mississippi prisons in 2014, the most recent year for which data is available. 16 inmates died in August 2018 alone. Correctional officials attributed most of their deaths to natural causes of illnesses, including cancer and heart disease. Read more. Let's see. So this is really, really a sad situation, a situation that should have been kept under control. But the DRC, the Department of Corrections, does not take their job always serious, and this is what happens. Just in Lucasville back in 1993, Warden Tate was the warden at that time. Caused a lot of problems there. And they told the inmates they fired him. I ended up in Belmont, and guess who the warden was at Belmont? Warden Tate. They put a warden from one institution to the next that handed so many, just handed out abuse that took away so much from the inmates that they really got fed up. And these are the things that we have to educate people on. We have to educate our inmate populations and the DRC. Myself, I probably would be one of the few people that would be able to go in during a riot and talk to the inmates to try to calm them down. It has to be somebody that they trust, someone that's one of them. And believe me, I might not support any type of violence, but I do understand it. And I do understand what is taking place and what should not be taking place. At a couple of our women's prisons, we have guards that are very sexual towards the female inmates. A few years ago, I reported it to the ODRC about one officer, and they said there's no truth to it, and it continued, but they still did not believe that there was any truth to it. But then I heard from other staff members he is like that. Yeah, and I'm sure that's not the only prison. I'm sure it's happening in the men's prison. I've heard of affairs between officers and inmates. And an inmate's not going to say no to that for the most part. You know, if that arises. But if inmates have to do their part, why doesn't staff have to do their part, or the DRC or DOC have to do their part? You know, to assure that violence would not take place. You know, and I kind of wish I could open this up to questions and we could have a discussion. But I do see some of I see our systems getting worse, not better. I think we had a start when Donald Trump had the federal prisons, some of their laws changed too. I think it's called the First Chance Act or something like that. That actually opened up the doors for any of us to work in prison or parole reform. You know, right now somebody's notifying inmates that FTR is not, that group fell apart, the bill's not in existence. That's not true. We had to find a sponsor for the bill because the sponsor we had backed out. And those are the same people that are complaining that nobody in the families lend a hand. So I'm not trying to be tough there, but if you're going to complain, get somebody from your family involved to help. You don't expect 3 or 4 or 5 people to be able to win a big battle like this, I hope. It's not going to happen. I am, though, hopeful that change will take place, and I do see possible change. But I'm not sure how much it will be in Ohio. There's been some promises, but I have not seen any action as of yet. but I'm sure something will take place. Either through laws having to change, the DFC taking the inmate's voice seriously. It's kind of funny when the news media comes after you and say, of course, for somebody that's been out 10 years and say this guy has not changed. So in other words, what they're saying is the ODRC in Ohio has not done their job with rehabilitation. I think that's kind of sad that the news media would actually feel that way. But the only way I see things really changing is if the news is fair with the reporting and not only look after the wrong things people did, but look at the possibilities of what's happening in their life, how they have changed, how they become productive, how some got married, are raising families, started their own businesses. Even a couple sit in council in the state of Ohio. One is in Cleveland, and he's also, I think, a candidate for mayor as well. Cleveland's been kind of open-minded, and that's what I do like in Cleveland. And Columbus, I don't think you have the legislators that care really about people coming out of prison. And what we got to realize is that someday one of them may live by you. So you better get ready for it and accept the fact and welcome them instead of pushing them away and pushing them into reoffending. Not that it's not the inmate's responsibility if they do reoffend, but it's also our responsibility on how we treat them and how we act. A lot of these people that are bashing others are Christians, are churches. You don't see too many Islamic people, Wiccan people, Jehovah's Witness people that's going to sit there and bash people. And that doesn't make a difference if you agree with their faith, but come on, you're American. If you are a Christian, you read the Bible, you pray for them coming out. Don't just sit there and bash them. Grow up. And until next time, folks, we're out of here.